Hello, Amrit. Thank you for meeting with me. Very good to see you on a Zoom call. So starting out, can you describe your role at the Arizona Senate and how long you've been with the legislature?
Of course. I've been at the Senate for over a year now. Technically, I'm in my second legislative session. The first session, I was just a page in the Senate page program. Then I was called back by my supervisor, Jenna Lyon, and was promoted to senior page, which has been a great opportunity to grow my leadership skills and provide feedback to the new pages.
Can you briefly describe the page process, like day-to-day tasks?
Yes, of course. So most pages, they assist from anything with being assistants to the senators, whether it's giving them water, bringing things to their floor or committees, or even going to the House to deliver bills, reading bills on the Senate floor on formal sessions. The page is a very multifaceted role. They do a lot and they learn a lot while doing so. So it's great to be able to take a mentor role now in my second session.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How would you describe the communication between Senate leadership and the page team?
I would say it's very clear and direct, especially because the instructions come from the Sergeant at Arms, who is our page supervisor that I mentioned earlier, Jenna Lyon. That said, messages from senators can sometimes be vague or pass through too many people, as usually we hear it through an email or we get phone calls from their assistants. Sometimes it can feel like a bit of a game of telephone, but usually we get down to it and are able to truly figure out what we need to know and what the message is.
So would you describe kind of the communication channels at the Arizona Senate to kind of go through multiple different like it's going through multiple channels to get to you guys, and sometimes that information can get blocked or just confused along the way.
Yes, that's sometimes how it is. And we are sometimes left with unclear directions, but we always try to, it's very easy to communicate with assistants. So as long as we go ask them or whoever asks for the test, they're always willing to help and provide feedback. Or we always have me as a senior page to help the pages out with any tasks or our supervisor.
So you can kind of the building is enclosed enough to where if you are confused about something, you can kind of just go directly ask the person.
Yes, it's very straightforward once you get the layout down.
Okay, that's nice. Okay. Moving on to our next question. Can you give me a time of when poor communication caused confusion or delays?
Yeah, of course. There's definitely been times where there's confusion or sometimes tasks get confused. One time I can reflect on is when two senators both requested water from the same page, which they tend to do whether they're in a committee or just like see them and they need water. And they waited thinking it was being handled by someone else, but no one actually brought it because there was miscommunication between the two pages, or it was just lost in translation. So mix-ups like that happen often, but we always finish the task and apologize to the senator, and usually they are quick to understand and accommodate the situation, and we always clear it up with the pages themselves. Another time, though, there was a mix-up during committee calls because we weren't told that the room had changed, which is usually quite important because we set up, well, I help the pages set up the nameplates, the instructions, what bills will be read in committee or evaluated. So not having that set up really throws off the process, and then having to move that to another room does take some time. But so that was definitely a bit of a confusion and a bit of a difficult moment, but we always work through it.
Actually, and you might not know this directly off the top of your head, so feel free to take a moment to think about it. How many pages do you directly supervise?
Yeah, believe I believe it's about 10 in
Okay.
my day. Usually I
Oh,
think
wow.
there's about 20 pages in total or 20 a little maybe more than 20. I know
Yeah.
Monday, Wednesdays they usually are a bit more busier, have more committees, but Tuesday, Thursdays are just as important and handle some of the most important committees like appropriations. So I have a great team of pages. I believe it's a 10 of them.
And would you describe having like I feel like 10 is kind of a large number of people to have to supervise, especially because it sounds like your role, you're moving around a lot. Is this something to where you notice that there's miscommunication just between pages themselves? Not only the building sometimes has miscommunications, but within the pages doing tasks?
Yeah, I think when we first started the session, everyone's kind of getting used to their new roles and getting familiar with the layout of the building and how to assist senators. So there are definitely times when they have miscommunication. But as a senior page, I've always had open lines of communication with them. And from day one, I wanted them to be comfortable talking to each other, becoming friends, because that always creates a more comfortable work environment and leads to less miscommunication. And with that, they have open channels of communication, they're able to talk about it. And if there's a task that one person has, but the other one has two tasks, you can delegate to other people who may not be doing or may not be given a task. So I think it's very crucial to have open communication, and it's definitely progressed throughout the session.
Would you say that the communication, not only just like the form of it, but the language that you guys are using is different between the way that a senior page would talk to a senator and the way that you talk about issues with the pages themselves? Do you notice the difference between that?
Oh, definitely. We
Right.
always try to put forward our best foot with senators, very professional, and make sure we don't cross the boundary between them being, someone of very influential standing and us who are just kind of there, play more of like an assistant role, which is very crucial. But whereas with the pages, it's important to just keep an open environment where no one feels like judged, there's no cliques, everyone is open to doing tasks together. And it's very important that we keep the two lines of communication different. Because if we were to only have very business-like, professional communication all the time with the pages, I feel we wouldn't have the relationship we do now that makes it very easy for us to get along and finish tasks very effectively without too much issues or anything like that.
So, because of that difference in communication, do you feel as though you and the pages have become close over the legislative stuff or legislative process?
Oh, yes, for sure. We have, I think, me alongside my other senior page, we were from day one, it was our role, our job, and kind of our hope that we got open lines of communication with the pages and that they felt comfortable talking to each other. Because last session, when it was my first session, I heard of some days not talking to each other at all, other than when the phone rang and they were sent to a task. So it's very important for us that I want them to feel comfortable and not sit in silence. I want them to come to work and look forward to seeing their coworkers and for whatever the day might have ahead of them. So I would classify us all as friends outside of work too, because it's just been a great opportunity to work with these wonderful individuals.
Nice, that's awesome. Okay, moving to our next question. Do you feel pages are given enough opportunity to provide feedback?
I wouldn't say formally, no formal feedback. We do talk to each other and maybe mention things to the supervisor casually, but there's no official channel for that, which can prove to be difficult sometimes if there's an issue ongoing between the pages or there was some sort of miscommunication. It's hard if they don't have the opportunity to give feedback formally.
Yeah.
So it would be helpful to have a structured debrief or end of day check-in where everyone sort of sits around and talks about maybe one thing that could be improved on if there was anything or feedback that they had from the day. But so far it hasn't proven to be much of an issue, but I do think this would be a great improvement to the wonderful program we already have at the Senate.
Okay, and when there are issues, I'm assuming the chain of command is usually like the pages communicate to you, and then do you talk to, you discussed your boss a little earlier. Would you take any of their concerns and take it to them?
Yes, so it just depends on the nature of the complaint or the feedback. Um, Usually I try to handle things the best I can and handle it with my other senior page as well. However, it's always great to talk to either of our supervisors, Jenna Lyon, who's the Deputy Sergeant at Arms, or our other supervisor, Jesse, who is also a former page. So he very much understands the process of being a page.
Yeah.
So the thing is, it's almost like talking, it's not as much talking to a boss, it's like talking to someone who is always there and willing to help you. So it's no problem for us if we do run into something, the pages communicate something to us for us to tell either Jenna or Jesse.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Okay. Oh, this is actually a very interesting question, especially relating to this interview itself and what I'm trying to get out of it. How is information usually shared with you? And would you describe it as effective?
Yeah, I would say most of it is verbal or through group texts for urgent information. So I know we have a just a page iMessage group chat with just me as the senior page with my fellow pages, as well as one with one of our supervisors, Jesse, who just tells us more formal stuff if need be. And I think that verbal instructions work if they're clear, but in a rush, things can get misheard or misunderstood, which is why sometimes I feel like it's helpful to have that number or have that group chat as a backup because if the pages ever feel like they need help with something, they do not hesitate at all to call if I'm available to help them in that moment or
Mhm.
just quickly send a message in the group chat and someone will come right their way. So I think it's the system we have going is definitely effective, but obviously in anything there can be faults, and that's what I mentioned earlier with sometimes like verbal instruction being unclear, especially if we hear something on the phone when we get phone calls in the office and it wasn't said clearly and the pages are left a little confused. We always just go check in with the assistant and make sure that we're on the right track.
Nice. And have there ever been conflicting instructions from different staff or senators?
Yes, especially when senators don't go through the right communication chain, it can prove to be a bit difficult with what they actually want. For example, the assistant might hear one thing that, oh, the senator doesn't need their stuff down on floor, but that, or in caucus or committee, and then what happens is we get to that room for whatever's happening, and the senator might be upset or confused as to where's my stuff. And there was just kind of a miscommunication along the way, or the senator doesn't tell their assistant and just assumes that the page is already bringing their stuff down. So, stuff like that can definitely cause some conflict or issues among staff and senators, but it's never too big of a deal. We always are quick to handle that. Or another instance is sometimes we get told to stay close by one person or go take a break by another person. So it's hard, especially when we get told that on floor or committee, and then we're kind of left undermanned in floor. Sometimes I've seen instances where there's only two people on the side, one on each side. And while we're in there, usually secretaries are calling us forward to deliver items to their office or to people around the building. So when there aren't enough people in there and someone said to stay, but someone also said to go take a break, we have issues like that. But once again, it's very easy to handle things like that.
Good. That's good. What role do the Senate pages play into the communication process overall?
Yeah, I would say we're like the connective tissue. We help everything flow behind the scenes. I sometimes I don't think we get the credit we deserve for how much we do because a lot of the times we get so many phone calls where we need to bring things to the office or to certain things happening around the building or out on the lawn. And I think it's kind of like where the cog in the machine, just kind of making sure things keep running smoothly. And sometimes if we miss a message or delay, it affects everyone down the line. So I think it's really crucial that we're in there because essentially we're being paid to do tasks and help with things around the building. And without that system, having someone to fall back on to help with those things, I think
Mhm.
other staff members in the building will be kind of overrun and overwhelmed with all the duties that do come with working at the
Yeah.
Senate.
Okay. Now, this next question is gonna like obviously answer it from your perspective, but I'm also gonna ask maybe kind of take the perspective like an overhead looking at all the pages. How well do pages coordinate with other teams? Because it sounds like you have your boss and like that's ahead of you, then you have committees, you have assistants, you have senators. How do they or how well are they at kind of coordinating this?
Yeah, I would say usually it's pretty well, very easy to coordinate. The sergeants especially are very clear and consistent with whatever they need done or whatever they need help with. Aides, however, can sometimes forget that we're not always in the loop and assume we know things we don't, which is hard because usually our line of communication and what we know does come from like me, a senior page, or our supervisors, Jenna and Jesse.
Mhm.
So along the lines, it can sometimes go over their heads, but we always work through it together. And I think coordination overall is going well so far.
Okay, that's really good. Now, feel free to obviously answer this to the extent that you would like to. But have you ever felt unprepared for your duties due to a lack of communication?
Yeah, I think that's always happens, especially when I first started my second session, and I think I'm sure the pages felt the same way in the first couple weeks of starting the program. You're kind of in this new environment, and you were told all these things in orientation, but you forget. So it's hard to kind of be thrown into that bustling environment where things truly do move so fast throughout the day. So I remember being sent to retrieve a senator from a room I had never heard of and just guessing my way around, which I'm sure is not just something that's occurred with me, but with many of the pages. And so I I think sometimes it can be attributed to a lack of communication, or in general, it's just being in a new place where you're kind of getting familiar with the role of the job. So
Mhm.
as we go on, though, it's great because you're kind of thrown into it and it's a very hands-on experience. So you do learn very fast. So I don't think that that feeling of being unprepared lasts for very long.
Right. And so you described this orientation process. Is that where pages kind of do all of their regular training? Again, is this like during session, before session? Tell me about the timeline of this.
Of course, yeah. So usually it's the first or second week of January, just depends on when the session started. So this year it started on January 13th. So our orientation was the week before. We had one day, which was where all the pages for both like sets of days came in. So it was the whole group and we all just got familiar with the process of the building. We were introduced to one another, icebreaker activities, the usual. And then we split off, got into our uniforms, took our group photos. Just that first day was more like an introduction into what being a page is like, being introduced to like people in the building through like slide presentations, and just most importantly, getting familiar with each other. Then
Right.
we break off into our separate groups, which is so for the Tuesday, Thursdays, they came in, I believe, the next day or the following day, and so did
Mhm.
the Monday, Wednesday people. And that day was just them coming in, going to the office, getting familiar with what it's like to have a day in the life of being a page.
Mhm.
Clearly, there were no like too many tasks then because the session hadn't formally started. But we did do things like a scavenger hunt, which sounds silly in retrospection, but when you're new to a building and you're tackling both the House of Representatives and the Senate and the Capitol, the old Capitol, it's really important to know your way around, especially with the fast-paced environment we work in. So they were able to pair off and kind of got into a more competitive atmosphere and just work through finding things. And I do think that helped them a lot in the first week of the formal session because they reference back to like, oh, we went through that when we did the scavenger hunt or things like that. So I think the orientation was a great way for them to get familiar with each other, get comfortable with each other, and before they headed into a job where teamwork is a big aspect of it.
Nice. What would you say the biggest communication strength of like of the Senate from your perspective as a Senate page?
Yeah, I would say there are many strengths. The pages are all wonderful individuals that Jenna and Joe, who was our sergeant at arms, picked very carefully. And pages are generally very respectful and willing to learn and explain things if you ask. So I think it's great to have them be in in a place where they're so open to wanting to become more a part of the process. And there's also, like I mentioned, a very strong team culture among the pages. We always make sure to help one another out. If one task seems too overwhelming for just one person or two people, we're someone's always willing to help hop in and help with the task. And it's important because this helps us all stay on track and make sure we don't fall behind on any of the things we're being told to do or the tasks we're given.
Nice. Awesome. Um, moving on. Okay, actually, this is a question I'm very excited for to hear from your perspective. And feel free, like, to take a second and think about it. If you could recommend one change uh, to improving communication within the Arizona Senate, what would you recommend?
Hmm. I think definitely having maybe more written reference materials or a live update system during floor sessions, because sometimes things move so fast during floor, you don't know if you're entering a committee of the whole or if you're doing a third read or a second read. So just like how we have outside our committees, we have pages run out and mark a bill, whether it's been passed or not. It would be nice to have sort of that live update where people know what's going on and they don't have to necessarily tune in to the live streaming of floor sessions or committee sessions. They can kind of keep track of it, whether it's in the building itself, online. Another thing could even be like a mini daily briefing just for the pages. Like I mentioned before, like so they have time to give feedback and also receive feedback because I think feedback's a great way to learn and whether that's you giving it to the people you work with, like from the pages to the senior pages or our supervisors, or us senior pages and the supervisors giving advice to the pages. So I think having that at the end of the day would be very important and very helpful.
Nice. Um, what kind of leadership style do you see within yourself and your boss above you?
Yeah, I would say it's mostly hands off unless something goes wrong. We want the pages to learn and want them to become comfortable with doing things on their own without feeling like they have to be supervised or managed for every task. Of course, we're there to help them. And of course, we are always going on tasks, sometimes with them or just on our own. But when they do step in or when our supervisors step in or we step in, it's very clear and direct, but sometimes it can be reactive instead of proactive. So I would say there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's more like we tell them if something's gone really wrong, we tell them immediately, like what happened and how to kind of guide them through that situation, but it's never in a harmful way, which I think really makes the pages feel more comfortable doing things on their own and not with a worry of, oh my goodness, I might get fired or scrutinized if I do one small mishap or one small thing goes wrong. We want to make sure they feel comfortable coming to us with things that may have gone wrong, and we can tell them, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm sure you're making it a bigger deal than it needs to be." Or if you do feel like that, we can kind of talk about it, but it shouldn't concern you too much, and just coming up with ways to deal with things.
Okay, nice. Now, earlier you described how there's multiple levels to this communication channel. You have you, your boss, and then you have senators and their assistants, and even some like staff that works above them. Do you feel, in your opinion, that there is a clear chain of command when it comes to communication as well?
Yes, I do think that there's a clear chain of command that they would traditionally like us to follow. However, in the moment, especially when things are as fast-paced as they are, it can get blurred. So some senators or staff don't follow the typical communication flow, which can throw things off. Like they don't go through the majority staff, for example, and instead go maybe directly to the sergeant at arms, deputy, whether that's Jenna or Joe, or sometimes they don't tell their assistants, and the assistants go somewhere higher or somewhere to the pages. And when that happens, things sort of get blurred and sometimes things get confusing. However, we always work through it and it's never too much of an issue. But I do think that with a job like we do have, it can be hard to kind of always strictly follow the chain of command. But what helps is everyone is so flexible in the building and willing to talk, listen, and learn that it's never too much of a issue at all.
Right. Nice. Um, would you say this is something I'm trying to think of off the top of my head? Because that's very interesting to me how there's multiple different levels and they all have to kind of work with each other to get things done. Are there any like unspoken rules, anything like that that kind of dictate communication at the Senate?
Yes, definitely. I would say there's a culture of professionalism. Of course, you're working with legislators who essentially make everything work in our state itself. And when you realize the gravity of that, you want to come across professional. And one thing that we're kind of told, or one thing we tell the pages, is that you be quiet unless spoken to. Obviously, if you're in the elevator, you're in a group and it's an awkward silence, you can always jump in by saying, "Good morning, Senator," and whatever their name is, or just "Good morning, Senator." And sometimes they can say "Good morning" back, "How are you?" And that's where it ends. Or we want to always leave it to the senator themselves to continue communication if they want. We never want to overstep that professional boundary. So it's really important that if they feel like conversing with us, they can, and we are always happy to have a conversation with them. And many of the times, like on floor, we don't have to then necessarily start a conversation with them, as we're
Mhm.
not really encouraged to do that unless it's a proper networking opportunity. But many times senators go up to pages on the floor and just strike up conversation. Or we have a senator that at the beginning likes to drop candy in each of the pages' hands. It's just every senator has their own personality. They're human after all. So you got to give them a break and let them open that line of communication if they feel willing.
Nice. That's
And
awesome.
new pages might not, yeah, yeah.
Um, do you think that the Senate encourages open communication among pages?
Yeah, I think informally, of course. We help each other a lot and rely on each other a lot. So it's very important that we do have open communication, not just between pages and the staff of the rest of the building, but between pages themselves. It's a team job, and it's very important that they talk to each other, talk to us. Formally, however, there's no structured way to give feedback or bring up issues unless it's serious. So again,
Mhm.
we always want to create that comfortable atmosphere. So if there is something seriously wrong or a serious issue, they feel comfortable talking about it with us.
Do miscommunications happen often, in your opinion?
Um, I think it just depends. For example, if someone goes out of the chain of command and or a senator asks something and the pages aren't aware of what's going on, that can
Mhm.
definitely cause a miscommunication. However, we're quick to tell the pages from the beginning that they are always able to ask for help if they're not sure of something and if they're confused, even if it's something that they may already know the answer to, they can always come to us as senior pages or our other bosses, Jenna or Jesse, and consult them as well. But it's very important that they have that outlet, which is us senior pages, to kind of like limit these miscommunications. And I think it's been going really well so far in this session because we don't tend to have a lot, at least on our day.
Okay, that's nice. So when there are kind of miscommunications or like just errors in general that the pages are making, can you describe more like how you specifically handle that as a senior page?
Yeah, of course. So it's usually a quick correction. We don't want them to ever feel um, kind of bad about what they did. It is a learning opportunity, and we want them to see it as that. So someone will pull them aside quickly and explain what went wrong or how they could improve upon that. So it's very always handled respectfully, but not always consistently depending on who's in charge. So, for example, if I was able to pull someone to the side and they did something, I just be like, "Hey, just so you know, for future reference, always do bring iced water to this senator. Don't bring water with no ice." That's just a rough example. But
Okay.
for example, if it's one of the staff, they can sometimes come across a little harsh depending on what the issue is, and because they assume pages already know this. So that can always be a little bit hard for the pages to go through, but
Yeah.
I don't see that happening very often at all.
Okay. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time, so I'm going to ask one more question. Um, how do the pages coordinate when sessions go? Because I'm assuming sometimes like the floor sessions or even committees can go late. How do the pages coordinate when it goes into the evening, like unexpectedly?
Yeah, so that's where our group texts come in again, or we quickly grab the pages and bring them into the our office, the break room, and have like a quick debrief and just talk who is able to stay late, who needs to leave early. We always don't want them to overstretch themselves as they're already there for a full 8 to 5. The
Yeah,
sergeant team especially usually updates us. Sometimes it can be last minute, but we're always quick to go to the pages, send them a text or pull them out real fast and just talk to them. So I think when we get those unexpected changes, it can be a little alarming at first, depending on the nature of the issue or the nature of the situation, but it's always quickly handled.
nice. Well, first off, I want to thank you for taking your time. I know usually it's can be kind of hectic there, so I really do appreciate you taking your time, and I think it's very cool the leadership position that you hold because I think it's an interesting because you're an undergrad, right? You're still in
Yes, I
college.
am. Hmm.
That that's awesome that you're able to be in a position where you can kind of lead people, but also still, I'm assuming, live a normal college life as well.
Exactly. And that's what's so great about the program is that our supervisors understand that and they want us to feel like we're here and we're in this, honestly, one of the most unique jobs ever. Whether I'm a page or now a senior page, it's been such a unique opportunity to be able to do this and also go to school at the same time and
Yeah,
have that on your record.
that's awesome. Thank you.